Good evening. Are we ready, people?
Got it.
Yes, go ahead. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of wards 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, 19, and 20, representing almost a third of the city of Boston and the Forum Planning Committee, we welcome you to another in our series of multi-ward forums, tonight featuring the candidates running for at-large city council. All 8 candidates were invited to participate, and we welcome Michael Flaherty, David Halbert, Ruth Z. Louis-Jean, also known as Ruth Z. Julia, also known as Julia Mejia, Carla Montero, Erin Murphy, and Bridget Nee Walsh. Althea Garrison did not respond to our invitation, but we welcome all the other candidates who are taking time from their schedules to join us this evening. Thank you. This year, you who are listening tonight and vote in Boston will be able to choose up to 4 of the candidates whose position you will hear tonight when you fill out your ballot. Information about the campaigns, as well as additional information about our moderator, emerging political leader Jaquetta Van Zandt, will be posted in the chat, but attendees' comments will not be posted, as it is our vehicle to communicate with the candidates during the forum. The forum is also being streamed on Facebook Live and will be rerun later on BNN, Boston Neighborhood News, as well. Now, please join me in welcoming our moderator, Jaquetta Van Zandt. By day, Jaquetta is the Vice President of Engagement at the Partnership, where she is responsible for building, coordinating, and maintaining strategic partnerships across the civic, political, and business sectors. By night, via her podcast, Politics and Prosecco, Jaquetta offers a unique setting where guests and hosts engage in topics surrounding current events and their impact on everyday life. But tonight, she's joining us because she is no stranger to politics in the Commonwealth, Boston, or in DC, where she worked on Capitol Hill. Jaquetta has been a respected voice at the table to aid in making significant decisions that impact communities of color. Most recently, she was the successful campaign of Framingham's first mayor and first woman of color to hold that post, Mayor Yvonne Spicer. We welcome her voice to tonight's conversation. Welcome, Jaquetta, and good luck, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Jaquetta, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you to the candidates who have joined us today, and thank you to everyone who's watching on Facebook. I'm already getting Facebook messages that some people are watching, so thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of this civic process, as it is extremely important. So I just want to talk a little bit about the format. We're going to ask a myriad of different questions. We're going to hit issues that that target communities of color, that target women, and we are going to hear from each of the candidates. And we are going to start with opening statements, and I'd like to start with Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Jaquetta, and thank you to the members of wards 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, 19, and 20. Thank you for organizing this. Also, thank you for the great vote that I got in your respective wards in the preliminary election. It's an honor and a privilege to serve as your at-large councilor. And we know what the issues are. They're issues that I've stood on the forefront of: the creation of more affordable housing, making sure that Boston has its own AMI. I'm encouraging everyone to reach out to your congressman or woman. If it's Ayanna Pressley, we need Washington to give Boston its own AMI. We share it now with suburban and Western Mass communities. IDP, time has come to close that loophole and put the ranges based on square footage, not on the number of units, so that we can capture more units of affordable housing. Expiring use projects continue to do what I do, which is fight for expiring use projects, and also public housing. I was born in public housing, and we need to renew our commitment to public housing. And it's those creative public-private partnerships that have put more units online. We also need to have an economy that works for all of its residents. We boast of having the best colleges, universities, and hospitals in the world, yet that economic opportunity does not flow throughout the neighborhoods. Creating a system where we have BPS curriculum that matches Boston's economy needs to be at the forefront moving forward. And lastly, COVID relief. As chair of the COVID relief committee, making sure that those very precious dollars coming from the federal government are fairly and equitably dispersed to those hardest hit those communities and those entities and making sure that we're doing the best we can to close those gaps, the opportunity gaps, the wealth gaps, the health gaps, and the achievement gaps. So look forward to the discussion tonight, but know that I'm going to continue to be a leader on those issues, and we'll work with the respective wards on this to make that a reality moving forward.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Really quickly, I forgot to mention that each candidate has about 1 minute for instructions. Not trying to spotlight you, Councilor Flaherty. We appreciate all that you said, but I wanted to make sure that all the candidates knew that they had at least 1 minute to do an intro. We're going to move next to David Halbert.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to all the organizers for pulling this together. My name is David Halbert, and I'm running to be one of your next city councilors at large. The reason that I'm running is simple. Boston is an incredible city full of opportunities, but we have to do more to make sure that everyone can access those opportunities. We have to have a representative, progressive city government that takes our values and turns them into practical policies on the ground, the kind that say housing should be a human right, that we need to have everyone be able to participate in our robust economy, and that we have to have educational equity for every children like my own daughters. And we also have to be forward thinking about what we're going to do to address the challenges of the future, like the existential threat of climate change. I'm excited about this conversation and about this work because after a career of over 15 years in public service, including on the city council, I know that if we work together, we can do that. We can provide the provision of basic services that everyone in the city of Boston deserves, and we can create the kind of Boston that we want to have, but more importantly, the kind of Boston that we deserve to have. So I'm asking for your vote on November 2nd to make that happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. And I want to just spotlight our efficient timekeeper, Joanne Keith, Chair of Ward 8. And we're going to move next to Ruth Z. Louise-Jean.
Ruth Z. Louise-Jean. Thanks, Jaquetta.
There you go.
Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. My name is Ruth Z. Louise-Jean, and I'm running to be one of your 4 at-large city councilors. I'm running because there's an incredible urgency to the issues that we face here as a city as we're coming out of this pandemic. Hopefully, I'm talking about affordable housing and home ownership, equity and excellence in all of our schools, issues of climate justice and transit justice, and supporting our small businesses. We know that only 1.2% of city contracts, which are lucrative contracts, are going to Black-owned, Latinx-owned, and women-owned businesses. That's embarrassing, and we have a lot of work to do to undo that embarrassment. And I will come at this work with my skill, with my passion, and my experience to move the needle. I'm a lawyer and advocate, born and raised here in Mattapan and Hyde Park. Really love this city, went to BPS. I've seen the good and I've seen the bad, and know the work that we have to do. Recently helped a nonprofit secure $10 million in funding to help close the home ownership wealth gap. That's the work that I want to do in partnership with each and every one of you, working on the big policy issues, but on the everyday issues too, making sure that none of our neighbors are suffering from food insecurity, that we are, no potholes are going.
Thank you, Ruth Z. We're going to move next to Julia Mejia.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Super excited to be here. For those who don't know me, I am one of your 4 at-large city councilors, won by 1 vote in 2019. And since taking office, we have come in with a sense of urgency, addressing the issues for those who have been left out of these conversations that happen. Usually it's things that are being done to us without us. In my short term on the council, I've already passed 5 pieces of legislation, raised over $500,000 to address food insecurity, to support our small businesses, as well as remote learning issues, and have created a community-centered approach to how we do business in the city of Boston, really creating opportunities to bring people together across their differences. I like to say that I'm one of the biggest mouths on the council, and I am not afraid to use it. And when you win the way that we did, we come in knowing who put us in office, and those who put us in office are the only ones that could take us out. So we lead without fear and recognizing that we're here for everyone, and all means all. Looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you, Julia. Next up, we have Carla Montero.
Thank you, Jaquetta. Thank you, everyone, for hosting tonight, and thank you all for being here. My name is Carla Montero, and I'm running to be one of your at-large city councilors. I'm an addiction social worker at Brigham and Women's and emergency psychiatric social worker at Children's. I am running because I see a lot of the same inequities and issues that affect people that I experienced so many years ago. As a young mother, I experienced food insecurities, was on the brink of homelessness, and depended on welfare to survive. My family has also experienced eviction and have have lost a lot of friends to gun violence in the prison system. And so I know a lot of the issues that impact members of the city of Boston because I have lived it myself and I have also had to overcome them. My campaign is deeply focused on the basic needs of every resident, and that includes ensuring that every family is on a pathway to housing security rather than a pathway to displacement, investing in an equitable education, and providing wraparound services for people with mental illness and substance use rather than stigmatizing and isolating them. I look forward to speaking to you all tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. Next up, we have Erin Murphy.
Did you say Erin?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for everyone for being on the call tonight. Thank you for the organizers. I'm Erin Murphy, and I'm running to be one of your at-large city councilors for the same reason I've taught in the Boston Public Schools for over 22 years. I love this city that I was born and raised in 51 years ago. I love the children, and I want to work together to have a more positive shared future together. As a single mom, I've dealt with a lot of the same issues many of you have, figuring out the public school maze for our children, which we know is not easy, dealing with mental health and recovery issues in our face. I am a renter here in Dorchester, so I do know how expensive rents are, trying to juggle work and paying rent and being able to stay here in the city and not feel like we're being displaced. Also, how to stretch a paycheck, right? We all know the city is very expensive to live in. I'm a community advocate. I've been giving back to my neighbors for decades now. I am proud that I received the James F. Gavin Award.
Thank you, Erin, for your time. Next, we're going to close out this section with Bridget Nee Walsh.
Thank you, Jaquetta. My name is Bridget Nee Walsh. I'm running for one of your 4 at-large city councilor seats. I'm a 15-year union iron worker, a single mom, and a small business owner. I'm also the first female ever elected to the board by the iron workers since its inception 125 years ago, currently serving my 2nd term as the recording secretary. I got into this race because change needs to happen in Boston. In our public school system, on Mass and Cass. Mass and Cass isn't just at Mass and Cass anymore. It's at Andrews Station. It's at Boston Common. It's at Nubian Square. It needs to happen with our affordable housing for seniors. We need to keep more families in the city of Boston. We need vocations in schools and address the fact that not every child is college bound, and they should still be able to make a sustainable living to raise their families in the city of Boston as well.
Thank
I'm
you,
watching
Bridget.
that timer.
As you should. Thank you, everyone, for those opening statements. And now comes the fun part where we get to ask you all questions. And so if you could just mute yourself, Bridget, thank you. And so I want to just give a pro-political tip here. The questions are, you get 1 minute to answer them. My pro-political tip to everyone is to focus on exactly what you want people to know. Don't lead up. Just tell us what you want people to hear. That'll keep you on time. So I'm going to start with the first question, and it is, what is your position on the ballot question regarding an elected school committee? What do you think is the best structure to address racial inequities in the Boston Public Schools? And I'm going to start that question with Councilor Flaherty.
My position has been longstanding. I support an elected school committee, one where elected members are accountable to the people. It's a little over 1/3 of the overall budget, and parents, and also grandparents raising their grandchildren, should have access and should be able to have regular contact with their school committee members. And right now, I challenge anybody here to be able to name all of the school committee members. The fact that they can't name them tells you, quite frankly, that we need an elected school committee. The second portion of your question, Jaquetta, talked about racial equity in the Boston Public Schools. Was that the exact question?
The question is, what do you think is the best structure to address racial inequities in the BPS schools?
I think that immediately, if you have a child in that 1st or 2nd grade that hasn't reached sort of 1st or 2nd grade reading and arithmetic level, we need to pump the brakes, wrap that child and their family around with very precious services. We cannot continue to just graduate students to the next level. And that's what we're seeing with respect to the achievement gap. And so making sure that we also have a system that talks about the possibility of having 2 teachers per classroom, reducing the class size, that will go a long way in helping.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Bridget next. Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I'm all right. I do support an elected school committee. As a mom of a 5-year-old who just started BPS this year, I had my first parent conference meeting the other day, and very few people showed up. There was very little structure. Somehow I ended up a co-chair on the committee, as well as a CPC representative. So I definitely see that. As far as the second part of the question, what was the second part? Racial inequity?
Yes, it's what do you think is the best structure? The best structure to address racial inequities?
I do think the Boston public school system needs to be reevaluated. I think busing still exists. I think we should have equity across the board. Everyone should be having the same curriculum. As Michael said, we need to, every child at the end of the day should be at exam school level. We shouldn't be holding the exam schools. They're not bad. We have the best exam schools in the country. We need to lift our Boston public school system so that they're at that same level for all of our children. They deserve it. They deserve a state-of-the-art education.
Thank you, Bridget. Next, I'm going to ask that question to Julia Mejia, Councilor
Yeah.
Mejia.
Thank you. So as a BPS graduate and a BPS parent, I know firsthand what the system can and cannot do for our children. And so which is one of the reasons why I, alongside Councilor Arroyo, filed a home rule petition so that we can have an elected school board. So I'm in full support of an elected school board. And in regards to the racial, how we can close that racial equity gap, listen, we keep having the same conversation, and the only thing that changes are the characters that are in front of us. I think that there needs to be more accountability measures. We're focusing too much of our energy on exam schools. We believe all schools need to be performing at the highest rate. And in regards to the literacy rates, we actually filed an ordinance to do a study on literacy here in the city of Boston, because we are passing students from grade to grade, and we're not looking at how that is impacting them with their social and emotional learning. And so I hope through this ordinance, we'll be able to dive in a little bit deeper on some of these inequities that exist in Boston Public Schools.
Thank you, Councilor. Erin Murphy, do you need me to repeat the question for you?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right.
So as the only educator teacher candidate, I will definitely bring my expertise and experience as a public school teacher for over 24 years to the council. The equity part of the question, I would start by making sure we offer high quality universal pre-K to every family in every neighborhood. That's important. I spent 20 years as a special ed kindergarten teacher, so I do know that that strong foundation is going to help with the achievement gap and not moving our children on. That's very important. I am in favor of an elected school committee, but I do know running citywide that it takes a lot of time. It's a stipend position, and I'm worried that who will have the money and resources to run. So I would propose that we match it up to the council district. So each district could have one representative. So we're not having all of the school committee members from certain neighborhoods across the city. So that's one way I would consider making sure that every neighborhood is represented on the school committee. So those are my, thank you.
Thank you, Erin. David, how would you answer that question?
Yep. So I think that we do need to be in support of question 3 on the ballot. And for myself, I've always advocated for a hybrid school committee. I do want to make sure that we have voices from our families like mine as a BPS parent, but I also want to make sure that the city council and the mayor's office has skin in the game and has accountability for the actions and at times the failures for our children for BPS. I also believe that we have to have a student member with a full vote. I think that's absolutely critical as the end use consumers of Boston Public School Services. Relative to equity, it's where we put our money, right? It shows what we value. So that means investing in universal K0 and K1 education. That means providing the infrastructure investment so we can make these schools into real places where all students can learn and all educators can feel that they're celebrated. No family should have to go through thinking, does my school have HVAC in the summer or something like that? And making sure that we're being creative about what we're doing at the high school level. And of course, making sure that we're thinking about the most creative ways that we can invest this $300 million windfall that's coming from the federal government for transformative change.
Thank you, David. Carla, do you need me to repeat the question?
Oh, thank you, Chiquetta. So I support a fully elected school committee with 2 students on the council with full stipend and voting rights. And in reference to the equity issue, we do need to invest into universal pre-K for our students. There are so many students that are already set behind before they even start kindergarten because they haven't had the opportunity to go to childcare to start learning more there. So investing more and also investing in our social workers in school, taking the recommendation from National Association of Social Workers of 1 social worker to 250 students in terms of the ratio. Because we need to also address the mental health issues that are happening in our schools and mental illness and trauma that our children in our communities face every day. And just, investing more in the support systems that they need and also supporting families to ensure that they have the wraparound services that they need to thrive.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Ruth Z., how would you answer the question?
I fully support an elected school committee. I also support having 2 students on the school committee with full voting power because having been on a bureaucratic city hall committee as a student, I know how lonely it can be as the only young voice on the committee. So I support that. I also, support making access to be able to campaign out to a broader amount of people. So Seattle has a great model of democracy vouchers to make sure that we have a wide group of folks who are able to run for office, able to run for the elected school committee. And support in terms of equity, the Office of Equity inside of BPS used to have pre-approval authority whenever a school was doing a hire so that we can ensure diversity among our teacher body. We need to bring that back. The Office of Equity at BPS needs that authority so we have diverse teachers who are sensitive to the needs of our students. Also believe we need more and we need to decrease that ratio, more social workers, more licensed guidance counselors. We need to use that ARPA money very intentionally that we're getting from the federal government for more universal pre-K and transforming our buildings so that our buildings reflect the dignity that we want all of our students to feel when they walk in the classroom.
Thank you, Ruth C. Our next segment will be on childcare. And so I'm going to start with David Halbert. What are 3 specific steps to address the childcare crisis facing Boston families?
Yes, well, if we're trying to face this challenge, we do, of course, need to invest in universal K-0 education. I think it really starts there through Boston Public Schools. We need to support more of the nonprofits that are active in our communities as well, that are providing it in ways that are culturally specific and living in such a diverse community, wanting to make sure that students, particularly students that are coming from our immigrant communities, feel that they are being reflected, that they have individuals who quite literally understand their languages and understand their cultural backgrounds and are sensitive to that. And it's also making sure that as we're investing in both of these services, that we are providing the adequate funding for it. I think that far too often we have these kind of programs where we set the standards, we set the metrics, but we don't actually have the programming in its place. And I think we also need to be more creative in terms of how we're working with our high schools and our community colleges in particular to create a greater cohort of individuals who are early childhood educators and providing them with incentives and support so that they can embark on their own entrepreneurial ventures. It's business creation and workforce development in addition to childcare.
Thank you, David. Ruth Z., how would you answer that question?
Jaquetta, can you repeat it actually?
Certainly. What are your 3 specific steps to address the childcare crisis facing Boston families?
Yeah, one is universal pre-K so that, that takes a big burden a burden off of our families if we can ensure that not only 4-year-olds but 3-year-olds have access to seats, and we can do that in by partnering with private centers and family-based centers that are already providing pre-K. We can expand upon that. The second thing that we can do is we need to expand what we're offering for after-school programming in a lot of our schools to make sure that our families are able to work those long hours that they need to work and that their kids are being cared for and also learning at the same time. And then third is that we need to find ways to make childcare more affordable for our working families. I think it's something that I hear about all the time on the trail for working families, for middle-class families, that childcare is basically a mortgage. And so we need to do what we can, both in City Hall for City Hall employees and for our working parents here to provide childcare at an affordable rate.
Thank you, Ruth C. Carla.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaquetta. No, I'm good because I was a single mom and child care for me. So I think one, thinking about changing the requirements for childcare vouchers as a single parent, in the way that the program is listed and the program requirements are, it's really challenging for some mothers to access those resources. Also, investing more in universal pre-K. We can't afford to pay for childcare. I mean, my child, even with the voucher, I still was spending a lot of money monthly for my son to be taken care of at a childcare place. So I think it's very important that we invest more in that. But also, just trying to make things more affordable. And, even when you're late to pick up your child from childcare, it's $15 the first minute, $1 each additional minute. So there's all of these systemic issues that impact people who already are struggling financially. So those are some things that I'd like to implement and change.
Thank you, Carla. Council Flaherty, how do you have your 3 steps?
Universal pre-K would obviously be the first one. Retrofitting existing school buildings to provide space for child care provider and their services, and also use our COVID-19 funds to grow the Child Care Entrepreneurs Fund to help small businesses, the small child care businesses, as well as supporting our BCYF to make sure we're also providing grants to provide those opportunities for companies to be able to that they were one of the hardest hit, frankly, during COVID-19. So they're going to warrant a tremendous amount of attention moving forward.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Erin, how would you answer the question?
Sure. Hi. So as a single mom who worked full time, I juggled myself, my children when they were young, trying to get them to school. It never lined up at the same time you have to be at work or when you're out of work. So the 3 things I would focus on are universal pre-K, fully funding community centers, and before and after school programming. I knew working in the schools that many times parents needed to drop their kids off before the school day started and were not able to come back until after the bell rang and the buses left. So making sure that schools have the funding to provide quality after and before school programming. Universal pre-K has been talked about for years. I know as a pre-K teacher how important that is, and we have to be creative and not just think inside the box of it has to be in our public schools, that we have to find other locations if it's supporting home daycares or going into other government buildings like libraries and other places to really find places for our children before and after school. And community centers need to be fully funded. And
Thank you, Erin. Councilor Mejia.
Yes. So really quick, I also have to agree, as a single mom working full time, there was a point in my time where I had to adjust my hours just so that I can qualify for a voucher. So I think that whole system is really set up to keep people in that poverty trap. So we need to do a better job at making sure that we're addressing that issue. I'd also like to see more late night providers for 3rd shift workers. I think that when we think about childcare, it's not just during the day. I think we also have an opportunity to expand childcare for late night shift workers. And then I also like to say that the city of Boston is resource rich, but coordination poor. And we need to do a better job at working in partnership with nonprofit organizations, the BCYFs across the city, to see if there's ways for us to partner with them to open up their doors during the day to provide affordable care to students. And while we're at it, Roots Montessori School just opened up in Roxbury. And I think when we're talking about childcare, we also want to make sure that it's quality.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Bridget.
I think the universal pre-K definitely needs to be. I'm like all over. My phone's going off. I'm all over the place. Sorry. We definitely need universal pre-K. As far as being a construction worker, I have to be in work. I have to start work at 7 o'clock on the dot, and we work 7 a.m. to 3:30. So finding childcare at 5:30 in the morning. Just recently in the past year, Build a Life That Works is a campaign to help construction workers find childcare that early in the morning. So we need to expand the resources for before and after school care. I would have to pay, because I'm a union iron worker, I made a decent amount of money that I didn't qualify for any of those vouchers. There were so many things that I just didn't qualify. I didn't qualify for food stamps when I had a few months off when the baby was born. You know, so it like Julia said, like they push you into that poverty. Like I'm not going to work less hours to get a voucher for childcare. I paid kind of through.
Sorry, Bridget, your time is up. I apologize. The next segment is about housing, which we know in the city of Boston is a huge issue and one that affects all people, but specifically communities of color. What is your plan, and that's in your control as a city councilor, that you could implement in the first 100 days to prevent displacement and stabilize communities at risk of gentrification across Boston? I'll repeat the question. What is your plan that is within your control as a city councilor that you could implement in the first 100 days to prevent displacement and stabilize communities at risk of gentrification across Boston? I'm going to start with Ruth Z.
So we're getting a lot of money from the federal government, and we can be using that money in very targeted ways. We need to make housing more affordable, and we need to build more. So we need to get to building more on city-owned land and put a lot of our funds into building affordable home ownership opportunities. The needs of every neighborhood is going to look different. Roxbury is asking for more affordable home ownership, and maybe in West Roxbury, what we need is a more affordable housing around transit or rental options around transit-oriented places. So that's something that where we should be directing a lot of our energy. And also a lot of our housing needs, we do need to work in partnership with the state house. And so to make sure that we are getting what we need to our families, the housing issue is a regional issue here in the city of Boston. We also need to be working with Community Land Trust and diverting more money towards Community Land Trust, our alternative models of home ownership and renting, so that there's more community control of what our neighborhoods look like. And we're not always having to bash developers because the community owns the land.
Thank you, Ruth C. Bridget, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. What is your plan that is within your control as a city councilor that you can implement in the first 100 days to prevent displacement and stabilize communities at risk of gentrification across Boston?
I think we need to reevaluate what city-owned properties we have. We need more rent-to-own opportunities in the city of Boston. And we need to build more housing. We just need more housing all around. We need to keep the families in the city of Boston as well as our seniors. So if we can reevaluate what we have on hand for resources, we can redevelop and resource some of those buildings. The city, we're not a poor city, and now we're getting even more money. So I think we really need to utilize that and put that into action. Put your money where your mouth is type thing. We need to build more. I don't know what more to kind of say about that. It really was a mouthful of a question. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Bridget. Before we go on, I just want to acknowledge that State Representative Liz Malia has joined us. And so I just wanted to give her a shout out. Councilor Mejia, I will repeat the question for you as well. What is your plan that is in your control as a city councilor that could implement in the first 100 days to prevent displacement and stabilize communities at risk for gentrification across Boston?
Yeah. So as someone who bounced from place to place growing up, it wasn't until I was in the 5th grade that I had my own room and always had to live in crowded situations. And so bought a house, had to take out my entire 401k to be able to stay here in the city of Boston to get my mom out of Section 8. So the housing crunch is real and has been for the last 40 years here in the city of Boston. And again, the only thing that changes are the characters that are in leadership positions. And so in terms of what I have been doing on the council is really creating a community-centered approach to planning and development. Oftentimes developers come around our way and ask us to react to a plan. And what we have created is a citywide steering committee that looks at the way they build in Austin and Brighton is very different than the way they build in Roxbury, right? So what we need to do is create a citywide Bill of Rights when we're thinking about planning so that it's consistent across the entire city. And then the other piece that I would like to say is that we need to be a little bit more aggressive in holding the administration accountable to this work.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Erin Murphy, how would you answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. So as the only candidate in the race who is a renter, I do know firsthand how the rising cost of housing can push families out of the city. Displacement is real, and we know it's happening all over the city with our seniors, not just our seniors, though, people all over the city in all neighborhoods. We have a housing crisis, and I do believe it needs to be addressed head on with smart development. What I know I could control is the city owns around 100 vacant lots. Many of them are buildable here in Dorchester, where I live alone. I would propose a moratorium on private market rate development of those parcels in Dorchester and in Roxbury. We can get creative working with the mayor's office to make more building contracts available to minority and women-owned contractors to build 100% affordable housing at these addresses. Our challenges around housing and equal opportunity in Boston, they're complex, but I do see that complexity is a great opportunity for us to multitask, something I'm often doing, and addressing more than one issue at the same time, having more minority women contracts out there. The city has also looked at some non-conforming lots along Blue Hill Ave.
Thank you, Erin. Councilor Flaherty, you've been on the council for quite some time, so I'm sure you've seen Boston change in housing and may have had some influence on some decisions. So I'd like to hear how you plan to answer that question.
Well, thank you, Jaquetta. Within the first 100 days, as the chair of the council's COVID-19 relief committee, I plan on using those funds to keep people in their homes by providing rental relief and also strengthening our eviction programs. As someone who was born in public housing in the Old Harbor projects and that opportunity that it provided my family, I understand this problem. Boston should maximize the impact of affordable housing programs that don't require state action. I know Julie will tell you, we get very frustrated when we're trying to do things on the council, but it requires state action, which adds months, if not years, to the problem. So, for example, we could use our opportunity to raise the IDP percentages to a higher figure and eliminate any loopholes. We can also expand efforts to use public land, the vacant lots that Erin had just mentioned, to build more affordable housing and to also increase funding for our acquisition opportunity program, as well as the first time home buyer program called the One Plus Boston Mortgage Program, which is great.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Carla, how do you plan to answer that question?
Thank you, Jaquetta. As somebody who has been on the brink of homelessness and has stood in lines for hours waiting to sign up for Section 8 or for subsidized housing and only to never be called, I know the challenges of being able to afford to live in the city of Boston. I was fortunate to use the home buyers program and purchase a house at the age of 27, but we need to invest more in our community land trust. Also, increasing the IDP so that more units that are created are affordable. If we're only at 13%, and that means if 30 units are going up, only 4 of them are going to be affordable, and that's just not enough, and it doesn't meet the demand in the city of Boston. Also using the ARPA funds for more rental vouchers for people who are experiencing homelessness. We need to really look at that and support people who are experiencing homelessness. Also, I'm just trying to think. Oh, sorry, I ran out of time. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Carla. Ruth Z.
Sorry, she had 5 more seconds.
Oh, okay.
Thank
You
you.
wanna finish that up, Carla?
Yeah, I just want to say that we as city councilors, we still can't give up on the fight for AMI. We need to still advocate and like Councilor Flaherty just mentioned, call your congresswoman and just we have to continue to advocate for things that are not within our control.
It legit takes more than 5 seconds to just construct a sentence. So that was masterful, Carla. Good job. Ruth Z, how would you answer that question?
Is this the housing one? I thought, sorry,
Yes, this is housing. I'm sorry, did I?
I'm happy to go again because I got a lot to say, but
No.
I did answer.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
I did it.
I think that's everybody. Sorry, David, coming back. David,
No problem,
how would
Jaquetta.
you answer the question? Maybe I purposely did that to you.
That's also very true. But in all seriousness, obviously this is a critical issue and the number one issue that we hear across the city, particularly in vulnerable communities. So we do have to do everything that we can to strengthen our eviction protections. We know that tenants and renters are experiencing the impact of the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, and it's going to be a little bit slower because of that. So protecting them, but we also have to make sure that we're thinking of those who are also in vulnerable positions that we may not think about. And that means investing so that we can have more connection, particularly with our seniors, especially in our low-income communities and communities of color, because oftentimes we know that they are preyed on by individuals who are seeking to make a quick buck by coming in, buying at a lower rate, and accelerating gentrification in the community. So we have to make sure that we have personnel that we're putting in around that and speaking out and reaching out to those individuals. And that also means at a structural level that we have to actually put our money where our mouth is and work within the city budget to provide adequate and additional funding beyond just what we're getting from the ARPA funds, but really shifting how much funding we're putting towards all sorts of tenant protections, housing programming, as well as making sure that other folks know about additional programs at the state and federal level.
Thank you, David. So we're going to throw you all a curveball, staying on housing, but we're going to ask the question a different way. And this question, I'm going to start with you, Councilor Mejia. Residents throughout Boston are concerned about the lack of planning for housing for low and moderate income families and individuals. How will you address the lack of affordable and appropriate size housing for families?
So
You need me to say it one more time?
yeah, I need a translator. Can you say that one more time?
Residents throughout Boston are concerned about the lack of planning for housing for low and moderate income families and individuals. How will you address the lack of affordable and appropriately sized housing for families? Translation, how are you going to hold these folks accountable, for the lack of affordable housing?
Jaquetta, that's what I need. Plain speak. Girl. So that I think this is one of the things that our office has been leading in. We actually held a public hearing order a few months ago around the impact advisory groups, right? Oftentimes the people who are selected or nominated to serve in these positions are usually sometimes some of the business owners, not the people who are deeply impacted about a current development project. And so I think what we really need to do is hold the BPDA and the city accountable and making sure that those who are living the realities have not only a seat at the table, but that they're able to inform the decisions that are being made on behalf of housing. I think it's ridiculous that the way we're building in some of these small studio apartments, we're not thinking about how do we build with families in mind. So I think that in addition to looking at this, we also need to put a pause. I would even say a pause on building luxury housing and condos and focus more of our energy on housing that families can live in here in the city of Boston.
Thank you. Bridget, how would you answer the question? Do you need me to, it's in the chat, but do you need me to repeat it as well?
No, I think we need to build more affordable housing. We just don't have enough of it. Building more affordable housing leads to job creation, which, is only going to boost our economy. It kind of hits on every level, but we need, like Judy said, we need to stop with the studios and the one bedrooms. We have a surplus of them at this point. We need to build more family housing, more senior housing. And we need to readdress what exactly affordable is. A lot of the system for what is affordable currently isn't affordable. Coming from a multi-generational home, it's myself, my mother, my two children. My mother with dementia, if I was to pay for her to have all day, everyday care, no way in the world would I ever be able to afford a mortgage or a rent in the city of Boston. So we need more resources like that, and we just need to keep building.
Thank you, Bridget. Erin, how would you answer the question?
Sure, thank you. So living here, growing up in the city and door knocking and being in every neighborhood for the last 2.5 years, talking to people, housing is a big issue. And I often talk to people who are working 2 jobs or overtime because they have student loans or high rent or high, and they're often told that you should work less or stop working overtime because you make too much. So we have to really look at what is affordable and how are we making more affordable housing options, smart development with housing options, not just these single bedroom condos. We have to really have a push for small families and families to be able to get into the affordable housing lotteries. And also I'm a strong supporter of the linkage program. I know that that money, $80 million has been spent since 2014 into the affordable housing in Boston. And I do believe as an educator, I always go back to workforce development and job training and making sure that our public schools are really quality schools that are allowing our students when they graduate from high school, if it's Madison Park High or other schools, that they're ready for the workforce. If college is an option, great.
Thank you, Erin. David, how would you answer the question?
When we're talking about planning, we have to go right to the source. This is one of the reasons why I've called for the breakup of the Boston Planning and Development Agency into 2 separate constituent components. Because when we're having these conversations, oftentimes the discussion around access to affordable housing gets overrun by the economic development interests, particularly by developers who are trying to line their pockets. And because the single occupancy units, not those family size units, are a little bit more cost effective for them. We have to separate those things out so we can have adequate planning and saying what we need, and then have the economic development conversation, and those have to work with each other. It also means that we have to have more investment in the Boston Housing Authority and making sure that we're accelerating the renovation of the existing properties and building of new properties and communities like the One Charlestown project. And we have to make sure that as we're having access to the housing for low income and affordable units, that they're not just being built or they're not just being simply maintained, but that they're truly cutting edge, healthy environments, both environmentally and physically, for everyone to be in, to have the kind of housing that they deserve and kind of dignity that they deserve in their housing.
Thank you, David. Councilor Flaherty, how will you address the lack of affordable and appropriately sized housing for families?
I've been a leader on this front. Boston is becoming the city of the very rich and the very poor. We have an obligation to protect the middle class and to create more affordable housing for both those that require deeply affordable units, but also the middle class. One thing we did as a council this December of 2020, we passed the affirmatively furthering fair housing. It was a text amendment to the Boston zoning code. Those efforts were led by my colleagues, Council Lydia Edwards and Kenzie Bach, and signed on by all of my colleagues, which expanded opportunities for families. It expanded housing opportunities for persons with disabilities and those that require additional accessibility issues, and also diversify the units and incentivize developers to move beyond just those 1s and 2s, sort of that condoization of Boston, to include not only bigger units that match the family size in the surrounding community, but also incentivize them to make them more deeply affordable. So those are things that I've done and will continue to do on the council on affordable housing issues.
Thank you. Carla.
Thank you, Jaquetta. This starts with the BPDA. We need to reimagine the BPDA into an independent public office in planning. We also need more transparency and open hearings. I myself had to file a lawsuit against a developer, an adverse possession lawsuit, where I ended up winning my case, but we have to make sure that when the buildings are going up and that BPDA is, we have to be more community centered. And right now we're more developer centered. And so we really need to focus on the residents in the city of Boston and the buildings that are going up that shouldn't be going up in certain neighborhoods. Also, thinking about when we are putting these buildings up, that we are creating housing for veterans, for people with disabilities, and for seniors. We need to make sure that it's accessible for everyone and for families as well.
Thank you, Carla. Ruth Z., how would you answer the question?
So what the affordable housing needs to look like is going to vary neighborhood by neighborhood. As I alluded to earlier, I too believe that there should be a divorce between planning and development. We're one of the only cities that houses both under one umbrella. And so, we need to separate the two so that we can have planning that informs development. For example, talking about how it's going to look different in neighborhoods like Mission Hill and in Brighton, and in Alston, we need to encourage the universities and colleges there to actually build more of that micro small housing, so to take some of the pressure off of the housing stock that exists, that's pushing our families out of the city because they're competing for 2 or 3 bedrooms, our triple deckers with students whose parents or whoever can pay whatever amount the landlord wants them to pay. So that's one way that we need to get appropriately sized housing. If we build more housing on campuses and encourage and nudge colleges to do that, that's going to take some pressure off of the market as a whole.
Thank you, Ruth C. Our next segment is on public health. Some of you have mentioned this in your opening statements, so I'm sure you'll already be familiar with this question. What would you do to specifically address the mental health and substance abuse crisis in Boston, and how has it manifested at Mass and Cass? And I'm going to start with the social worker, Carla Montero.
Sorry, can you repeat the beginning of the question? Sorry.
Sure. What would you do to specifically address the mental health and substance abuse crisis in Boston, and how has it manifested at Mass and Cass?
Thank you. So I think first, we need to look at, reactivating the Long Island Bridge. I have so many patients who talk about how much it saved their lives having access to those resources and services. As a clinician and working with people every day and seeing how much how much COVID has also exacerbated mental illness and substance use disorder all across the city. We have to begin by, meeting with all stakeholders and creating more programs that use a harm reduction approach, because this population is constantly going through the process of, through a detox, through clinical stabilization programs, transitional stabilization programs, and then residential programs. They often never go through the whole entire process because there aren't enough beds available for them to get to the next step. And so a lot of this always comes back to housing and making sure that people have safety and security in order to focus on their sobriety. The pandemic is the opiate pandemic is getting worse at Mass and Cass. And, also we have to think about the spread of, HIV and Hep C and different things that happen when people are using injection drug use. So there's a lot of pandemics happening in one that we need to address.
Thank you, Carla. Ruth C., how would you answer the question?
Yeah, so one of the big problems with Mass and Cass, what's happening is that it's a lot of people come there for healing, and it's actually a place of harm. So it's a concentration of a lot of services. You have your homeless shelters, you have Boston Medical Center, you have methadone clinics. And so we do need to deconcentrate the services because it's unfair for a number of folks, the humanitarian crisis that is existing there. We do need a housing first model, which means we need to reform our zoning code to make it easier to build affordable and supportive housing as of right. And there's also a role, I believe that there should be in Mass and Cass czar, someone in City Hall who every day, all they think about their job is to solve the crisis in partnership with a bunch of key stakeholders. We need the state house involved here. The governor needs to use the power of the purse to encourage other cities, because more than 60% of the folks down in Mass and Cass are not from Boston. Other cities need to invest in their own social infrastructure to deal with their populations that are suffering from homelessness, mental health crises, and addiction. So it's the power of the purse combined with more supportive housing on our end here in the city of Boston with wraparound services.
Thank you, Ruth C. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. First of all, only 3% of the city's operating budget is allocated for public health. So first order of business is to increase funding for public health. And as a strong supporter of our community health centers, I, as chair of the COVID-19 committee, will be looking to direct a significant amount of funding for that. We best boast of some of the best hospitals and network of community health centers in the world. And this is a problem I think that we can solve. As far as Mass and Cass goes, place is a disaster. Nobody over there is getting themselves healthy, sober, straight, or their life back on track. It's a predatory, untenable environment, and the escalating crisis endangers those seeking treatment and shelter. And the residents and the businesses and the employees in the area have absolutely had it. And we're lucky they haven't sued the city, quite frankly. for the enjoyment of their property in their businesses. So more needs to be done. It's beyond crisis proportion. Clearly, it's a regional problem. The last census over there, 65, maybe as many as 75% of the individuals there are not from Boston. We can and must be doing better for those poor souls over there.
Thank you. David?
Yes, I was actually just in Massachusetts with some South End community leaders on Friday, and it's harrowing, you know, when you're there and seeing what's happening on full display. So we have to, as others have said, you know, we have to take a regional approach to this. Boston should be leading it. It is unfair that our city, and particularly the neighborhoods of Roxbury and South End, are shouldering so much of this burden. But we also have to remember that while we focus so much on Mass and Cass, because it is so visible, it's not limited to there. You know, I know that there are issues in every corner of the city. I was just talking with individuals from Jamaica Plain about what's happening in Eggleston Square and the emergence there and violence that's happening according. So we have to make sure that we're diffusing the services to other parts of the city. We have to make sure that we are taking that housing first model. We have to make sure that we're investing in mental health clinicians, social workers, substance use disorder counselors. And we have to make sure that when we're having this conversation with those other communities, they understand, and it can be an uncomfortable conversation about it. We also have to make sure that we're being as bold as possible and not leaving anything on the table, like safe consumption sites and other ones that can be a little bit controversial, but we have to take into account.
Thank you. Erin, you got a minute, girl.
I know I got to talk fast. I got a lot to say on this one, but you know, I've walked through Mass and Cass many times with all the different stakeholders over the last few months, but I had a loved one on Long Island in detox the night the bridge was shut down on the island, and the island was evacuated back in October of 2014. So I have been working closely with the Office of Recovery Services and the Gavin Foundation, supporting those struggling down there. And like David just mentioned, all across the city. Also, I ran the Boston Marathon for the Gavin Foundation, and I raised over $50,000. But more importantly, the reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to fight the stigma associated with mental health and recovery, something I know because we've struggled with it in our family. So I know firsthand how mental health is so closely related to those struggling with substance use disorder. We have a public health crisis going on down there. All of the stakeholders, those struggling business owners and residents all need to have their voice heard. I will work every day to decentralize recovery services, include all the affected neighbors, family members, business owners, and have a conversation about city responses. Treat everyone with dignity and respect, but we really need to come together and come up with solutions and not just keep talking about it because it's an election year. I know that we can do better down there. And I've been there, and like Michael said, just yesterday, I mean, there's tents where people are being sexually assaulted. There are people overdosing, dying. Today, the police were down there because someone had a gun.
Thank you, Erin. Counselor Mejia, how would you answer the question?
Yeah, so I actually was in Mass and Cass today doing a business tour. Oftentimes we talk about this conversation, and because I'm the chair of workforce development and small businesses, I really wanted to do this through a different lens to really hold the city accountable to the financial loss that so many are experiencing there as a result of what's happening. The other piece of the conversation is when we think about our return on investment, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations and folks who are getting millions of dollars to support this area, but yet not much has changed. So our office filed a 17F, which is a request for information, so that we could do a deeper dive to see are we getting our return for investment and where are the gaps? And then the last thing that I'd like to say is that there's always this tension between us versus them. The fact of the matter is you don't have to be a city councilor that represents that area, because this should be an issue that all city councilors are leaning into and addressing, because what happens in West Roxbury is also impacting people in Roxbury and vice versa. So we need all hands on deck, and we need to create the table for everyone to have the same conversation as it relates to what we're going to do to address this issue.
Thank you. Bridget, closing out this segment, how would you answer the question?
Mass and Cass, it should have never lasted as long as it has. It should have never exploded as much as it has with the tents. I think we need to it's been made way too comfortable for the people that are residing there. There is a jail there is a methadone clinic, there is a homeless shelter, there are a couple hospitals. We need to take those amenities and dispense them throughout the city so it's not so consolidated. And as people have mentioned, Mass and Cass doesn't just exist in Mass and Cass. It's now in Andrew Square. It's in South Bay Plaza. It's everywhere. Just a couple days ago, I was over South Bay to buy my godson shoes for a wedding, and there were 4 pairs of homeless people's sneakers inside shoe boxes at the Target at South Bay. They just walk in, change their shoes, and walk out with a new pair. It's everywhere. Long Island's been closed for 5 years. We can shuttle people out there. We can reutilize resources like we have, like the Shattuck, where only a quarter of it's being used, repurpose that building, and get people these long-term care. Did I get cut off? Yeah.
Thank you, Bridget. So this next segment is on racial equity and justice. What will you do as a city councilor to advance the struggle for racial equality and justice and address the wealth and health gap in the city of Boston? And Erin, I'm going to start with you. And Erin, I'm going to tell you again, you got 1 minute.
Oh, so much to say about all of this. So as a school teacher, I do know that education is really tied to this. Wait, repeat the question again. I see your face. I'm like, is this, but I think you said the equity connected. But
Don't look at my face. My face says a lot of things.
Yeah, I was like, wait,
Okay,
what did
I'll
you
repeat
do?
the question.
No.
Can you pause for her, Joanne? Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. What will you do as a city councilor to
Yeah.
advance the struggle for racial equity and justice and address the wealth and health gap in the city of Boston?
Yeah, I was on the right track. So I do think education is the first thing. We need to make sure that every family, every child has access to a quality, high quality school in their neighborhood, and that we are not shortchanging our children. Education is definitely important. I know from during COVID and the outreach with the different health centers across the city that there were many neighborhoods when it came to the vaccine, that we found that many communities were not accessing the health access. We knew it's in schools too, when the schools shut down. I know that the school nurses often are providing more than just Band-Aids and wellness checks. So to make sure that we are funding our health centers, that we have health centers that are accessible to all communities, that they feel safe and welcome with, translations, people who can access, but also the other part of this is when it comes to high schools and making sure that we are aligning our curriculum in the public schools so that when our children graduate, that they are ready for the workforce and that they're able to afford to stay here in the city, and making sure that we're empowering all of our neighbors across the city is something that I will strive for.
Thank you, Erin. I'm going to repeat the question so that you all can hear it.
Yeah.
The question is, what will you do as a city councilor to advance the struggle for race equity and justice? The second part of that question is addressing the wealth and health gap. The first part of that question is, what will you do as a city councilor to advance the struggle for racial equity and justice? So those are the two questions within that question. And I'm going to go to David next.
Yes, so I think that the first thing we need to do is get real information. And this is one of the reasons why I've championed the presence of the post-audit and oversight committee on the city council, and I'm glad to see it return, because it's only by asking these kind of questions with intention that we can actually get the information that we need. And we need no greater example of that than the city's abysmal contracting record with small minority and women-owned businesses, right? We have to do that. We have to look at every system that's happening in the city of Boston, particularly those that are under the auspices of city government, in terms of who's being hired, who's being promoted, who's being advanced, who's representing within our classrooms, within our civic spaces. And then to go to the wealth and health gap, they're all interconnected. We do have to have more and make sure that we're supporting more culturally responsive interventions in the health space, particularly with our community health centers, because they are such a vital linchpin, particularly for our immigrant community and communities of color. And for wealth, we all know the fact, right? $8 of average median wealth for a Black family versus $247,500 for a white family in the city, and others in between being lost along the way. So that means access to more entrepreneurship opportunities, investment in small businesses in communities that are marginalized, and making sure that we're expanding access to home ownership opportunities, because we know so much of wealth is tied into real estate.
Thank you, David. Counselor Flaherty, how will you answer that question?
First thing, we need to name and identify the disparities that exist in the city. And we also need to make sure that we have a city workforce that matches Boston's diversity as it pertains to those gaps, whether it's the achievement gap, the opportunity, and the wealth gap. It's through home ownership. So investing in home ownership in small businesses to help sort of build that capital, and that credit worthiness, and also BPS, having a curriculum that matches Boston's economy. It's no good if we're just graduating kids from our high schools if they can't go on to some of the best colleges and universities that call Boston their home, and they can't go into the workforce to not only get a good paying job and or a career. CEOs are moving their companies to Boston on a regular basis to tap into that strength, and but that economic opportunity is not flowing out to the neighborhood. So we have to make sure we don't miss another cycle. We need to prepare them. It's why I was a co-founder of Boston Year 13, giving 12th graders an additional year exposure to STEM to help them have a pathway to these careers.
Thank you. Ruth C., how would you answer the question?
We obviously have a lot of work to do to close the gaps. There are a lot of instances in our history and in the historical record where the city council has ignored Black and Latinx residents who've come to them saying that the private market hasn't engaged in discriminatory practices, sold us price homes that were way above value. So when I talk about the work of equity, I talk about equity being corrective. Equity is about corrective action. It's about correcting for past wrongs. And we can do that in multiple ways, one of them being through home ownership, providing for resources for down payment and closing costs for first generation home buyers. So people whose folks weren't homeowners, so that they can build and create that intergenerational wealth for generations that follow. So I think we have a lot of work to do in that space. There's already work happening. We need to invest more in our nonprofits, because our nonprofits are really at the heart of crime reduction. If we're talking about reduction on the front end and community stabilization, it's our nonprofits that hire our local young folks and that provide interventions in other ways people can't. And we need to support our community health centers and more of them, like coming to Hyde Park. So thank you. I think that's part of the answer.
Thank you, Ruth C. Carla, how would you answer the question?
So as someone who's first generation homeowner, I think homeownership is a critical way to close the racial gap. We need to promote the homeownership courses and the programs that we have available to people of color and make it more accessible to people of color. Also think talking more about mental health and destigmatizing mental health and mental illness in our communities of color, especially because we typically don't talk about it, and involving people of communities of color in the climate movement. There is a 30-year life expectancy difference from Back Bay to Roxbury. And so, areas like where I live in Dorchester, Chinatown, East Boston, and Mattapan, in Roxbury, there's a climate crisis and there's air pollution and heat zones, and we need to invest more in our urban canopy to ensure that people are healthy in our city, and also breaking up the existing contracts that have been bundled. Beckma had a great study that, highlighted what we already knew. And so I think we need to make sure that we're unbundling those contracts and dividing them up so that people of color have more opportunities in the city of Boston.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you.
Bridget, how would you answer the question?
I think this is where unions come into play. As a female iron worker, I wasn't always, the ironworking field wasn't always open to females. And since I've been in, I've gone out and recruited more females, more minorities in underrepresented communities. Where people, you're not a white female, you're an iron worker. You're a brother or sister iron worker. Our life's in each other's hands every day on the job site. And everyone gets paid the same. Everyone has health insurance. Everyone makes a livable wage. We have a retirement plan, an annuity. Is my connection unstable? Am I breaking up?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Anybody? Hello? Okay. So all right, because I froze for a while there. I think bringing vocations back into all the schools and linking the vocations up with the appropriate unions. So once people graduate 12th grade, they can go into a career path that's already set and ready for them to be able to raise their families in the city of Boston and make that sustainable living.
Thanks, Bridget. Councilor Mejia, I'm going to repeat the question for you. What will you do as a city councilor to advance the struggle for racial equity and justice? The second part of this question is address the wealth and health gap.
Yeah. So I think that that's one of the reasons why I ran in 2019 is to make sure that those who have been disregarded here in the city of Boston are front and center. And so I can tell you what I've done so far on the council. We've established a residential kitchens ordinance here so you could build your own wealth and establish your business right out of your home. We created a new line item in the budget where you now jobs for 19 to 24-year-olds. We're targeting kids who are coming out of Madison Park, DYS, and foster care to ensure that they're set up for success and viable careers. We also held a hearing order to ensure that Black and Brown businesses are able to thrive outside of Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, because Black dollars should be all across the city, like Newberry Street, Faneuil Hall, and all those other spaces and places. The other piece in terms of health, I just like to say we established a Black Men's Commission here in the city of Boston, and we worked with barbershops and hair salons to create a new initiative here where we're training barbershops and hair salons on how to talk about mental health to provide their clients with the resources that they need to check themselves and not just get their hair done, but get their hair checked too.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I guess that was your dominoes effect. I get it. We're almost there, guys. We just have just a couple more questions. You guys are doing good. Bridget, how's your Wi-Fi working?
I have no idea. Can you hear me?
This is why we need municipal broadband.
Come on, somebody! I knew you were gonna start.
Why we need municipal broadband. We can't be going over a bridge like that. So
yeah, I just want to let you know my budget advocacy. We got a study now for municipal broadband.
Ma'am.
Dakota, can you give us a minute to switch over timekeepers? Give Joanna
Sure.
hand break. Okay, great.
Okay.
Bridget, sometimes if you turn your video off, your audio would be better. I know that from students with the Chromebooks. Yes. We can try that.
How am I doing?
Can you confirm you can see my screen? The timer?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
I can see it.
All right, we're ready.
Everyone go on mute until I call on you. All right. This is also, sorry, let me just get my life together here. This next question also falls in line with equity and racial justice. The question is, what steps would you take to enforce the Boston Jobs Ordinance and procurement equity goals from contracting and spending at City Hall? I'll repeat the question. What steps would you take to enforce the Boston Jobs Ordinance and procurement equity goals from contracting and spending at City Hall? And I'm going to start with Bridget, since we want to spotlight her Wi-Fi.
As far as I know, that the inspectors right now, there's only 2. So I know with all the new construction, like the building of the seaport, that's been going on for 20 years now. And we've had 15 to 20 buildings going up at the same time. 2 inspectors is not enough to make sure that there are enough minorities and women on job sites. I think we should definitely double, if not quadruple, that number to make sure that the ordinances are being kept. And I think there needs to be accountability for where they are not. All right, I'm looking at my timer here. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. But I think that would be the biggest thing, making sure that people are accountable. The companies were held accountable. The companies were fined to the highest extent of the law. And it's a priority that more residents, more minorities, more females are out there.
Thank you, Bridget. Councilor Flaherty, how would you answer the question?
Well, first, obviously, and steps that the city council has done, which is putting stricter penalties in place, also increasing the number of inspectors, and also auditing or working with our trades, having them do a census to identify where they need to make improvements and do outreach to get more residents of the city, people of color, and women. And on the procurement side of the house, what we heard from public testimony, particularly on those big contracts, was that they were too big and too onerous. And a lot of the smaller businesses didn't have sort of the back of the house support to be able to sort of compete for those contracts. One thing we as a council working with the Walsh administration is talking about reducing or breaking up those bigger contracts into smaller contracts and incentivizing people to compete for those contracts, but also making sure, because we're in the low bid and sort of have fiduciary responsibility to the residents and the taxpayers. Low bid doesn't always have those profit margins that make it attractable for folks to want to go after it. So we need to have a combination of making the contracts attractive and helping them and support the back of the house.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, so our office has been working in collaboration with the Boston Jobs Coalition folks to actually update the existing ordinance so that we can have it reflect the new, what these times require. What I find to be incredibly disrespectful and sometimes I guess just dismissive is that when we meet for our quarterly meetings with the folks who are handling the monitoring, we always hear that there's no talent in the city of Boston. And I find that to be highly offensive, that you can't tell me that you can't find Black and brown talent here. So I think the enforcement, we can't keep expecting people to change their behavior if we're not really leaning in on the enforcement side. We need to stop doing business with folks who continue to disregard the enforcement protocols that we already have in place. And I think one last thing that I'd like to say in regards to this is that at the end of the day, the bottom line is nothing's going to change unless the administration puts up complete pause on folks.
Thanks, Councilor Mejia. Ruthie, how would you answer the question?
Yeah, so we definitely need more monitors as part of the Employment Commission to monitor compliance with the Boston residents job policy. Our targets are not even that high and our contractors can't meet them. So we need to shame the bad actors and we need to cut off doing business with those who fail to meet the Boston residents job policy. We also need to make sure that we're working in partnership with our union to do everything we can to diversify the workforce of folks who are working on our city contracts. There's a lot of work that we need to do in partnership with a number of nonprofits, a number of different groups that are working in community to help solve this issue. I agree with what Julia said, the idea that there are not residents in our city who are capable to work on these construction sites or these job sites or whatever contract exists, not just construction, but whatever contract in the city of Boston is basically an affront to being a Boston resident, because we know that there are people who are qualified. It really is about access. And that is our job, is about making that access open to all.
Thank you, Ruthie. Erin, how would you answer the question?
Yes, so I do believe that we should not just count on shaming, but using our power that we do have to hold these contractors accountable to hire more minorities. We also have to help the minorities and women with the outreach to get the quality workforce. But I've seen these bids and many people shy away from applying for these jobs because the bids are like pages long, and making sure that we support our minorities and women to fill out the forms and make sure that we're sharing the job opportunities for them. Also, workforce and making sure that we invest. It goes back to schooling always, I feel, quality vocational high school. And we have to work closely with our union so that we're preparing our students to succeed in these jobs that we know are out there. I am a firm believer in city jobs for city kids and making sure that we are not disqualifying our students. Many people have already said that they say that we don't have enough quality, workforce here in the city. And I know as an educator and a parent here in the city that we absolutely do. And supporting programs like the JAGO.
Sorry, Erin. Thank you. So Erin, here's the thing, because I'm going to give you a pass because I know, as you know, what it's like to be an educator. You have to explain things. I get it. I understand.
You want to be thorough so that you don't leave anything out, but I get it. 1 minute. But you can always visit my website or call me.
In this forum, you're not an educator. You're a candidate.
Well, I'm always an educator, always a mom, but yes. I'll try to
All
be
right.
quick.
I'm sorry, David, we're gonna close this out. I'm not forgetting you, David. I'm not. I feel like your sister's about to text me like, why are you doing this? So I'm not leaving you out, but I will close out this section with you. And by the way, I'm not afraid of her.
Well,
A little bit.
I think Carla still has to go as well.
Oh, sorry.
I don't
You
know if
remember
Carla's sister's
David and
gonna text
forget
you.
me. Thank you, neighbor.
No problem, neighbor. But really, to go back to the point of the question, absolutely, we have to have more monitors. We have to do more in terms of investment in Madison Park as our vocational high school and providing a pathway to these jobs. And part of holding these actors to account when they're making decisions on who and who not to hire means that when they violate on this, we do have to have a moratorium. But more than that, we have to publicize this and make sure that the broader public knows, because it is really important that we're meeting this, both in terms of investment in our city and making sure that there's access to jobs, career sustaining jobs here in the city, because those are our friends, those are our neighbors, those are our family members. And also because when businesses act unscrupulously, they're probably taking advantage and cutting corners on other things. So it's more in our safety and in our best interest. And in terms of procurement, I believe that we need to have a citywide adoption of the Massport model to make sure that others can have, folks who have historically been cut out of wealth generation opportunities from a procurement standpoint can actually have access to these contracts. And that also means supporting those who are providing technical assistance, like our Main Streets organizations, which is one of the reasons why I'm so proud to be a board member for East Boston Main Streets.
Thank you, David. Carla, it's on you.
Oh, thank you, Jaquetta. So I think I have a few things. I think one, I agree with Councilor Mejia that we do need to work with the Boston Jobs Coalition to update the Boston residency plan, but also working in collaboration with our labor unions and allies to ensure that we are recruiting more people of color and that we are, also including inclusivity on, sorry, now I can't talk, language inclusivity. I can't ever say that word, but I'm gonna just skip it. But to make sure that we have, language access in training for people who may have a language barrier. Also, changing what redefining what responsible means, because we have so many construction sites where people are in violation, and if they are not in compliance, then we shouldn't be awarding more contracts to people who are in violation. Also, hiring an inspector general at the city level that can, review and hold people, hold these.
Thank you, Carla. It was the inclusivity. Yeah, that that took some time.
Yeah, I can roll my R's, but some other things I can't.
In the essence of time, because we also know that there's a Boston mayoral debate happening, and I'm sure you all want to see who is going to take that spot on the 5th floor. We have one question left, and then we're going to go into closing statements. In the meantime, you will see my pretty face go from the computer to a phone as I'm sorry. Yes.
Just Jaquetta, if I may, on behalf of all of the candidates here, we're also scheduled to be at Ward 16 for the Democratic Ward Committee. And so I'm the first one up. So, and they're calling for me now. So if I ask your indulgence and my fellow candidates' indulgence, if I can take the next question, then I'm gonna have to leave to do the Ward 16, and I'll try to filibuster for everybody else to get from where they are over to Ward 16 Democratic Committee over at Florian Hall.
No, I'm kidding. Of course you can. We'll
Thank
give
you.
the question, of course. Okay, so we'll get to the question. The topic is democracy. What actions do you support taking to strengthen accountability in Boston's strong mayoral system? Specifically, please address if you support the proposal to amend the city charter to allow changes in the budgeting process and participatory budgeting. Are there any other steps you would support, and how would you advance these policies?
Well,
Try to get all that in 1 minute.
Very good. Thank you, Jaquetta. Obviously, I'm on record. I voted in support of the creation of the ballot question to grant the council greater powers. Someone that's been the longest serving and has lived under strong mayor form of governments. I can tell you this past administration was much better and easier to deal with as a council than the previous administration. So councilors are duly elected representatives of Boston residents. We're in a representative government, and we deserve greater influence over the budget and budget decisions, because that determines the outcome for our city. In a closing, three issues we didn't get to, I just want to address in my closing, is that to support a connected and reliable and affordable public transit system. The future of our city depends on it, along with addressing climate change through an environmental justice lens. And lastly, calling for treatment on demand, and not just treatment when having a bed ready for when folks are ready for recovery, but also making sure that through the aftercare process that we have supportive housing. That's how we're going to solve our opioid crisis in the city. And I want to thank you, Jaquetta, and thank the respective ward committees. And I appreciate allowing me to go last to be able to attend this meeting. And guys, I'll see you over here.
Thank you. Why don't we do it that way? Why don't you guys answer the question and roll right into your closing? That way, just for the essence of time, you guys can log off. Does that work? Marie Ann, does that work?
Jaquetta, can you repeat the question again too, please?
Sure.
Yes, that works fine. Thank you.
Okay. The question is, what actions do you support taking to Okay. What actions do you support taking to strengthen accountability in Boston's strong mayoral system? Specifically, please address if you support the proposal to amend the city charter to allow changes in the budgeting process and participatory budgeting. Are there any other steps you would support, and how would you advance these policies? I'm going to start with you, Julia, and just go down my screen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for hosting this forum tonight. So yes, I support the question. Actually, I'm already on the record and have already been a big mouth in making sure that everything is a democratic process here in the city of Boston. In fact, our office has created a series of budget pop-ups where we literally take the budget into community and ask people, how do you want us to spend your dollars? So we didn't wait for this charter amendment to be presented to the voters. We've already started modeling that behavior so that people can understand that these are their tax dollars, and we have the responsibility in making sure that we're spending those dollars the way they want us to. The other piece of the work, we actually worked with Councillor Edwards and Councillor Breeden, and we filed a an ordinance around digitizing democracy and making sure that we're able to keep people engaged beyond COVID and keeping Zoom as an option. And the one last thing that I'll say before my time is up is that I deserve a second term. I've been working really hard. I have a growth mindset, and I hope that you will consider me one of your 4 votes on November the 2nd. I know you didn't. I should have had a little extra time to wrap up, okay? I'm just letting you know. But I'll mute myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Next, we have Bridget.
I am definitely in support of democracy and letting the city council take more control of the budget. I think the city councilors, especially the at-large, are more in contact with the constituents, with the people of the city of Boston, whereas they go out into every neighborhood, and their job is to listen to the needs and concerns of the constituents. So I think they know kind of more firsthand, as well as working with the district councilors where the budget is needed and most necessary. As far as, I don't know if my wrap up is included in this, so I don't want to get cut off like Julia was.
Your closing statement is included.
Okay, so I am going to head out. I'm Bridget Nee Walsh, running for City Council at Large. I think we need a blue collar voice at the table in City Hall to represent middle class working families every day, and I plan on being that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Erin?
Thank you. Yeah, so I definitely am in support of the ballot question that would give the city council more power over the budget.
Erin, I think you muted yourself.
Is someone muting me? Am I? No.
Erin, we're going to come back to you. We'll figure out.
I keep getting muted. It's not me. I can see the screen.
Okay, we're going to move to David, and we'll come back to you, Erin.
Okay.
Yes, I am in support of the amendment, but I think it actually go a step further. I think that the city council should be able to create its own fully independent budget and then work with the mayor's office, the executive, to actually hash this out and do the hard work of government to get to the best result possible. I think that in addition to that, we need to expand voting access for individuals who are in our undocumented population. They are here, they are residents, they are taxpayers in the city in so many different ways, and they're a vital part of the city and our city life, and they need to be enfranchised. And I also believe that we should lower the voting age to 17, potentially 16 as well, for municipal elections. Once again, David Halbert, running for Boston City Council at large. I'm asking for your vote on November 2nd, and hopefully casting a little bit earlier, as early voting starts this Saturday, because a career of over 15 years in public service, a life dedicated to our city, a perspective as a Black man working and living in this city, as a Boston Public Schools parent, and as somebody who deeply cares about the future of the city, lets me hit the ground running on day one if you give me your support and if you give me your partnership in building the kind of Boston that we deserve. Number one on your ballot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Carla. You're muted, Carla.
Sorry, I think I'd get used to this by now. So I am in support of voting yes on one, to support city councilors to have more of a role in the budget, and also, agree that we do need to look at ways to increase our democracy by being inclusive, allowing 16-year-olds to vote, and also to allow people who are undocumented to vote as well. As the daughter of Cape Verdean immigrants, I know how important everyone's voice is in the city of Boston. And so again, my name is Carla Montero. I am running for Boston City Council at large and hope to earn your vote on Tuesday, November 2nd. Thank you all for organizing tonight, and thank you for watching. In this competitive field, I bring a unique perspective in terms of my lived experience and my professional background as a social worker. And I know the issues that people face every single day, from the pain of housing insecurity and the trauma of gun violence to environmental racism and the stigma of mental illness, because I've had to overcome all of those same challenges. And like our Congresswoman Ariana Presley says, those closest to the pain should be closest to the power. We should be driving and informing the policies. And I sincerely appreciate your support. Thank you so much, and hope to earn your, I don't know, I can't tell if the timer is on or off. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Carla.
Okay.
Erin, we're gonna come back to you. How's your mute button going?
Hopefully it works now. Am I staying unmuted? So yes, I support the ballot question that would give the city council more power over the budget. We are elected every 2 years, and the people hold us accountable. And as a candidate who has been campaigning in every neighborhood, and I'll also be a counselor showing up and listening in every neighborhood, I know what the neighbors need and want, showing up and listening. So that really matters when it comes to the budgeting. Right into my closing speech. I was born and raised here in Dorchester, where I've raised my children. I'm running for city council because I love this city, and I want Boston to stay a place where families want to stay and raise their children also. I believe we need a fairer city. We need a city that works for everyone. We need a safer city. And we also need a city that's focused not just on change for change's sake, but I believe we need to really focus on progress in every neighborhood for every family. We also need the kind of leadership that is steady, competent, and compassionate, someone who listens, learns, and cares. And I know that I'm that type of leader, and that's what I'll bring to the city council. I am proud to be described as a hard worker, and I believe you all deserve a city councilor who will work just as hard for you as you do every day for your family. So I am grateful to be here tonight to share and answer your questions, but would also love if you consider me for one of your 4 votes. Early voting starts on Saturday, just a few days away. The election is 2 weeks from today. So please visit my website at erinforboston.com to learn more. And thank you so much for having me here. And thank you for the very thoughtful questions. I really enjoyed answering them and listening to the other candidates' answers.
Thank
So
you, Erin.
Thank you.
Bruce C. Let's take us home.
Thank you. Last but not least, yes, I do support yes on one. I believe that everyone should have a decision-making power in how the city allocates its budget, starting with the city council to every constituent, because it's our money, it's our tax dollars. Our budget is our value, and our budget is a value statement, what we believe in. So we should be able to have say on that. One of the biggest crimes is that we don't have same-day registration here in Boston, in Massachusetts. So a lot of what we need to do is work with our Boston delegation in the State House to make sure that same day voter registration happens. People don't really get interested in elections, let alone local elections, until 2 weeks before the election. So the cutoff is 20 days before is an abomination, and we need to work on that. And I care deeply about civic participation. I've worked on a number of voting rights cases, recounts, and redistricting. It's something that I care deeply about, bringing the people to the table into politics and letting them know that their voices matter. My name is Ruth Louisiana. I'm running to be one of your 4 at-large city councilors, born and raised here. I love this city. I've seen Boston change so much. We've come a long way, but we've got a lot of work to do to close a lot of those racial wealth gaps, to make sure that no neighbor is suffering from food insecurity, to make sure that we are building for our work with our working class families in mind, that we are transforming our schools into places that are worthy of the dignity of each and every one of our students. I come to this work with heart, with skill, with experience, excited to work in partnership with each and every one of you to build a better, more equitable, more inclusive Boston. I hope to earn your vote on November 2nd and November 3rd to get to work with all of you. Thank you so much.
I mean, you took full advantage of that extra time. But,
Amen.
So thank you, Ruthie, and thank you to all the candidates. I pulled over so that I can close this out, and I'm going to turn it over to the team who put this together. So a huge shout out to the multi-ward committee. That's Ann Russo, John Broussard, Joanne Keith, Mimi Turley, and Aziba. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. If anyone is interested, I'll be on NBC 10 tonight after the mayoral debate for a post-debate commentary. You can find me there. Thank you all again. And Mimi or someone, I'm going to turn this over to you.
We wish to thank the members of the Multi-Ward Planning Committee from the sponsoring Boston Democratic Ward Committees. We'd like to thank Yvonne Long of Ward 8, along with myself. From Ward 9, Angelina Camacho, she's the chair. From Ward 10, Christopher Fries, and co-chair Ann Steinberg. From Ward 11, Ann Russo, who's the co-chair, and Mary A. Turley, who's also the co-chair. Thank you so much, Marie. And she's the co-chair of the Mass Democratic State Committee woman. Ward 15, we'd like to thank co-chair Karen Charles, co-chair Ed Cook, and Davida Andelman. From Ward 19, who so graciously gave us the Zoom and has tirelessly worked with us to help get this off the ground. We'd like to thank David Offzevet, who is the co-chair, Karen Payne, who is a Democratic National Committee chairwoman, Ziba Cranmer, who is our tech goddess extraordinaire. Thank you so much, Ziba, for giving me a rest from being the official physical timer. John Broussard, who's also a tech god. Helen Raisin. We thank you so much, Helen, for all of the work that you did. You are peerless. And from Ward 20, John Cushing, who's the chair, and Glenn Williams, who's the co-chair. Just a reminder, please remember to check www.bnnmedia.org for times and channels of the upcoming broadcast of tonight's forum. Lastly, don't forget to show us what you felt tonight. Find your polling place. Using the following website. You can vote early using the website below. Early voting and drop-off locations are also available, and also absentee ballot information can be found here. This information will also be found on the Facebook pages of the various wards.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you in 2022 for the upcoming elections. Good night, everyone.